Hi, I'm Jeremy Clarke. I'm an Australian journalist and I'm based out here in East Africa. I've worked predominantly in Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia over the last 8 years or so, and I've done some extended stretches in Eritrea and South Sudan. I guess over this best part of a decade, I've seen a lot of the best and worst that this continent has to offer. It's a vibrant, optimistic place most of the time, but it certainly falls prey to human folly and misfortune in often conspicuous ways. That's certainly true in what I've seen with the effects that climate change have had on this region. As a reporter, I've talked with countless herders and pastoralists and learnt the new ways in which they're trying to deal with what's becoming just unprecedented territory for them, weather patterns they can no longer read, for example. This story came about when I sat down with a colleague of mine called Brian Harding. He's a climate change expert, and he used to work out here for years, and about 2 years ago he moved to Thailand. And when we caught up recently, we were struck when we were sharing our recent experiences of working with remote communities in these two countries. So some of these striking similarities between the two realities that these communities were going through in the southern parts of Thailand and in the center of Kenya. And what we were seeing was that the effects of climate change were upon both of these communities. They have been for decades, we now know. But these were communities that were adapting. They were looking for site-specific, individualized solutions to extreme weather patterns. And they were doing this, these are tribes and communities have never heard of each other, thousands of miles apart, coming up with unique and novel ways to try and adapt to a new global reality. And that was fascinating for us. And we traveled to both locations. First to Thailand, and this is in 2011. Thailand was devastated by floods, particularly down along the southern coast, where we traveled to a place called Krabi. And I met a woman there who's lost 4 of her homes rather. She's living in a 5th home now that she's rebuilt further up the shore as the rising sea levels over the last 20 years have claimed more and more of her land, and her current home is now at the very back of the land she used to own. She has nowhere else to go, but considering that, she remains remarkably unbowed, and she's rallying her villagers and the local children to go out day after day and plant mangroves, because that's thought to be the best natural solution to extreme weather patterns and rising sea levels. And it remains to be seen how successful she will be for her current 5th home. I mean, the sea level is rising. They're still having devastating cyclones and floods, but she hopes at least she can protect further inland and protect food sources of canals and ponds where people further inland source their food. And they're out there every day doing everything that they can. And it was so similar to when I went more recently to the center of Kenya, and I met with the Samburu tribe. And these people are pastoralists and herdsmen through and through. Their livelihood and their identity is so wrapped up in their rearing of cattle. And I talked to people in their 50s and 60s who remember in their childhood that their fathers would have 500, 600, 700 head of cattle. And now just a dozen or 2 dozen is common. And that's because the droughts that are just proliferating in that area are decimating their livelihood. But they too, like the community in Thailand, are adapting. They're doing anything that they can think of with great enthusiasm and great optimism to try and buck a trend that they know is beyond them to reverse. And for them, it means things like some really novel solutions. Like more and more, they're buying camels, like you'd more commonly find in North Africa, and stocking their herds with them instead of cows and goats, or more of a mix now, because they know the camels are more robust to dry weather patterns. Equally, they had this really fascinating insight from their history of insecurity. Whenever these tribes had been at war, they would bunch their herds together, bring different families, different owners of herds, bring them together, and then move them away quickly when rain came. And they've tried to figure out why it was those pieces of land that were the most resilient to these new dry weather patterns. And it turned out that because the intensification of pummeling hooves basically was breaking up the hard, cracked, drought-ravaged ground and letting this very occasional rain penetrate into the soil. And so now they're actually replicating this insight. They're trying to capitalize on what they've learned, and they have planned grazing blocks, and they're trying to replicate with extraordinary success, actually. And they've done this for a few seasons now. And what we're seeing is a traditional tribe, a community, changing their practice for the first time in living memory, and they're doing that as a way to survive and protect their culture. And so that's what I wanted to go into with this story. We went to these two places that, on the face of it, bear no great comparison. But when you go in there and talk to people, it reminded me that the effects of global warming and climate change are a global phenomenon. They're already and have been affecting communities so far apart in such profound ways that they're threatening their ways of life. But I left both of these communities equally sort of optimistic. These are groups of people who are doing everything they could to rise to this challenge that's very much upon them. And we dealt with that in this story.